Okay. So hi, Leonid. How are you?
All right, Sonia. So I think that we getting something rolling here, and the episodes are
Yes.
mounting up a little bit. So let's.
Yes. Last time we were talking about the Paralympic mindset, which is something that I see very often in families here in Chile. But I wanted to talk to you about a different uh, perspective that I also see very often. It's that in one way, there are a lot of families trying to do everything they can for using all their resources, money, effort, time, energy in order to get the big results. But on the other hand, there are also families that are kind of overprotective and they keep the child in the house. They don't want to expose him to her or him to the outside world. So, what's your experience about that kind of parenting?
Oh, absolutely. That's a very good point, right? Because getting back to our starting narrative, right? The starting narrative that there is no good or no special presets for special
Absolutely.
parenting, right? So the fact is that if you look at the kind of the tool set and the skill set or the instinct set that we are equipped with as the parents from just the evolutionary perspective, well, what is the closest matching one? That's the baby period, right? So that's
Yeah.
where the healthy child is relatively incapacitated and needs this all around protection. That's those first few months of life when the child is all, kind of kept inside, surrounded, and so on, and requires all sorts of the protection. And I guess few years back I kind of coined the phrase that some parents kind of resonated to. It's looking at the life of, especially again, we talk about the more severe child with cerebral palsy, like eternal babyhood. So it's like the
Yeah.
child remains a baby eternally. And
And we remain parents eternally too.
again, parents, but again, the baby parents, right? So you see, that's a baby
Yeah.
parent component. So, which is,
Yeah.
again, that's where comes a very tricky component, right? So, on the one hand, indeed, a child requires full servicing, full care. So take Rasir. So she cannot take care of herself, right? So she requires external assistance, just like a baby in that sense, right? She requires external assistance with all the basic needs of her life, right? So she requires feeding, she requires changing diapers, she requires washing, she requires all this, everything hygienic and so on. So that has to be done to her. And
Yes.
it's also quite understandable that her general level of, let's say, immune system and so on, and the vulnerability to the external factors when comes the winter, when it comes the whatever the weather changes, when it comes whatever the allergies and other things, so that she's a lot more vulnerable to those factors as well, right? And especially for the parents who, for instance, experienced things how a regular cold could escalate into a full-blown pneumonia, and or how a regular stomach upset could translate into like weeks of troubles with the reflux and pains and whatever other things and the weight loss and so on. So of course it's very understandable that you naturally switch on this primeval protection mechanisms which are built in, and these are there mother hen. If you talk about the hen and the chickens, right? So it's the mother hen instincts, right? So you see the one that just kind of to cover everything, to be super protective, to not to allow any kind of intrusions or any factors of the volatility to get into the thing, and just keep things, like at as unchangeable as possible. And that's really where we are facing the other extreme, right? So the opposite of the Paralympic mentality. And this is where, indeed, I would connect back to our main narrative about the anti-fragility, right? So the whole message in the anti-fragility approach is highlighting that we've got three different levels and states. So that one is a fragile systems, meaning the systems which are not sort of enthusiastic or which are vulnerable to external volatilities, right? So you see that means that they try to like stay away from it, right? So then there are robust systems which are able, which have a certain level of border and defense so that they can withstand the external challenges, right? And then the third level would be the anti-fragile systems, means that the systems that actually grow and improve on a certain healthy dose of external volatility and external factors. And it's important to understand that we biologically are those anti-fragile systems, right? But the range is very different for healthy people and or for healthy children and for the children with cerebral palsy and other developmental disabilities. So this is where it's really important to understand that you can't just eliminate one component or another. So the same way as you can't, if you overexpose a child to the level of challenges which exceed his capacity, that would be destructive. But in the same vein, on the other side, actually, if you don't bring any volatility factor into it, that makes the system even more and more and more and more fragile. So basically, you build the walls of just, climate control within the 5 degrees, right? So you see, then you get afraid, oh, maybe there is a little bit of a draft over here, so then you close all the windows and so on. Then your climate control shrinks down to 3 degrees, then to 1 degree, but then what happens? You can't completely avoid volatility, you can't completely avoid risk and so on, because there is external factors, there is weather, there is, like all sorts of things. So that's why this is really important to understand that the fragile protection type of the approach, which is that baby thing, right? The baby protection instincts, that they are also equally misleading as the Paralympic mentality. And this is really what, again, we kind of coming back to this bigger mindset, is that it's not really immediately jumping to the conclusion, oh wow, tell me exactly what to do, how much is right. Unfortunately, again, this is a child, this is a human being, this is a person, It's both a complex biological system, but it's also, it's a complex person with his preferences, priorities, differences from day to day, and so on and so forth, right? So, and that's the central message there, is to say, well, as a mindset, this is what you have to develop and grow. You have to see those three things. And actually, the central message for us, right, is that we want to move that barrier through your care, through your parenting and so on. It's to move that barrier of the fragility further and further away, to increase the zone of the robustness and to gradually build that zone of the anti-fragility when the external factors, they become the source of progress and creativity and evolution rather than the potential damages. So seeing that that's really the whole, that you're taking the entire, that you're always dealing with the spectrum, but then that spectrum gradually shifts, right? So you see that you want to build that spectrum in the direction away from fragility towards increasing robustness, towards improving anti-fragility. But if you are just staying put, if you are just building thicker and thicker walls, if you are being overprotective, left alone, and in that particular lack of any kind of external stimulus, the system will be drifting the other way around. So the threshold of fragility will be getting lower and lower. The room for robustness will be getting thinner and thinner, and then the anti-fragility component will be shrinking to the potential disappearance. So that's really the big point.
I think, as you said, yeah, there is no recipe here. There is no right way of parenting a child with special needs. We're all trying to make our best, and that's a very important message. I think maybe in this area, what I see as a key is to follow the quality of life.
Absolutely.
Because you can keep him or her very safe and healthy, but what is the quality of her life? Is she developing? Is she happy? Is she enjoying life? So I think that idea of quality of life is a great farol that illuminates your path.
Absolutely, because you see also what also often happens, right, and that what is probably one of the best indicators there is, when you're not sure about the physical factors, right? So you have also the other side. That's the emotional part. Because also when the child is being in that overprotective environment, what often happens, and what is the best indicator there, is it comes with the emotional fragility and behavioral volatility. You've seen so many kids who are literally just continuously flipping from being, exaggeratedly giggly and, smiling and so on, but then, let's say the next moment the same child is screaming and crying, and then the parents are trying to find a way, okay, how we have to please it, how we have to do it. So that's why, in that sense, cooling things down, right, and understanding there's, you don't need to do something special. The child is evolving biological and, human being system. So just by giving them that room for a little bit of the experimentation, a little bit of that, finding those islands of their strength and letting build on those little islands of strength through the home care. Again, that's why we talk about parenting being so critical, because only at home you can build those things. Don't expect that people at school are going to, even they're really could be having their hearts in the best places and so on, but they have to follow the protocols, they have to, write down reports, they have to take care of the number of kids at the same time and so on and so forth. For them, it's a job at the end of the day. So you don't
and they don't have the same connection that we
absolutely
do, that we have.
Absolutely. So they, that's just inevitable that it happens that way, right? And what comes to the same thing is what is in fact is actually a paradox, right? Because in quite frequently, you get this type of response from the parents saying, she or he's good with the strangers. He's good with the outsiders. Let's say he's good with the helpers. He's good with the whatever, with the therapists or the school teachers and so on. But then, but at home he's so difficult. His mood is always changing, and and he could be very spoiled and this and that and that. So these are really the great indicators that you are not meeting the child. You have the huge head start and the huge advantage over anybody. You as the parents, you have that advantage. And if somehow your child is better with the others, that means you have to be introspective. You have to look at you, and you have to understand that, where we have screwed up with that connection. So where we have kind of lost that bridge, where we have been either over-externalized or over-protective, where we haven't met the child, that didn't give them enough privacy, independence, opening and so on, which allows them to grow and build and evolve from there. Again, you don't need anything super special. You don't even need to get too much of the activity or too much of training, too much of the time outside, like fresh air and so on. Even within the house, with all the basic daily care activities, whether it's the feeding, whether it's the just being and doing things like being together, whether it's a hygiene thing and so on. Through those interactions, you can build tons of things. The moment you switch your mind and the moment you start looking at the opportunities of where the child is trying to do certain things, right? So meet them where they are trying to expand those things and letting those evolve. That's really the foundational part. There is so much potential in every child, even the most sort of severely affected, even the most unstable, even the most volatile and so on. It all comes down to you, your ability to meet them where they are, and on the one hand provide that overall safety and confidence, but on the other hand find the balance for that, however little is this initial room for creativity, self-exploration, build, play, and so on. So that's really the key message.
Quite a challenge as well.
Pardon me?
Quite a challenge for
It is a challenge. Again, it is a challenge. And nobody is saying that this is easy, but again, that's my whole point, is that it's the two ways to look at it. Oh, wow, it's a challenge and there are no recipes. Well, that's the part of being at the frontiers. That's the part of seeing this whole situation, seeing the parenting is not the thing that when you're trying to please somebody outside, when you're trying to catch up with some, like standard development and so on. You are in a unique situation. It's you with all your strong sides and weak sides. It's, it's your other half, right? So the other parent with their strong side and their weak sides, and it's a child, right? And then it's the other kids in the family. So you are building that very, refined ensemble. But my point is that it's not the moment you just start building that respect for the child and respect for that little creativity spaces, for those little achievements, for those that they develop and build by themselves. The moment you start from there, things will build and expand and so on. And again, it's not so difficult. It's all within you.
It's life changing. So that's a very good lesson. Thank you for sharing it with all of us.
Okay, you're very welcome, and I hope that resonates and helps. Ciao.
Absolutely. Bye bye.